We got Jensen.
Hey,
Yep.
Jensen, you better not have beautiful palm trees in the background when you come on.
No.
Okay, good.
He's in the closet.
So you're at home still? Because I know you don't travel with the Jensen Lewis poster, right?
Yeah, that one was a nice little addition to the corner of the man cave down here, guys. But great to be with you. And ironically, I came back from fantasy camp at the end of January, and it felt like Cleveland out there because it was, mid to high 30s for most of the mornings, and we barely got to 50 a couple of days. But good old Ohio weather out there, so everyone's ready to go. So looking forward to the year.
When do you go?
I'll probably go out sometime in March, and I like to always coincide it with March Madness because then you can hop up to Vegas and take in a couple of the sports books and maybe enjoy a flutter here and there. But the nice thing, guys, is there's not too much to decide for this club this year going into camp. You got a lot of the roster already set, and that's a great thing to have with the continuity aspect of it. And now it's kind of looking at do you bring in a veteran starting pitcher for some depth, been around for a little bit, maybe as a backup for injuries, things like that. And then, see what they do for the bench and how Tito decides to fill that out, and then the back of the bullpen as well.
Jensen, it's an interesting point because we've talked about because it seems like they could use another veteran middle of the road, like a guy you could use as your third or even fourth starter in the playoffs, right? I was saying a few months ago that there was rumors that the Mets would be willing to trade Carrasco. What do you think? I mean, Michael Wacha was a free agent. He just signed, I know, with San Diego. I'm trying to think if there's any starters left on the market at this point. You think Carrasco is a reasonable option, or is he even making too much money at this point?
Yeah, well, I think the money aspect is probably something that Cleveland doesn't want to take on. And by and large, if you think about the Mets, that might be their biggest question mark going into the season is, you've got a lot of guys up in age. We know what Verlander's doing over age 40. I mean, last year was incredible. Scherzer, remember, started to break down a little bit last year. Kodai Senga, the whole deal with the physical, the Mets, physicians and medical department weren't exactly, sold 100% right away. And then Carrasco's up there, obviously, in innings. We know what his tenure was here towards the end of that. I think the Mets really have the biggest question mark in their rotation of their club. So they're probably leaning on a healthy Carrasco to try and help the bottom of that rotation.
That's a fair point. Let's get to one of the new guys in Josh Bell. Obviously, the one thing lacking from this team last year was power. Josh Bell's got power. I even think, when he first came into the big leagues, I thought he was going to be an all-star player. And he's been a good player, but not quite. I think he was an all-star maybe once. I think there's another level to his game, and I think there's a chance the Guardians can bring it out of him. Do you think there's another level to his game?
You hope there is, Bull, because it feels like a mutually beneficial deal here for not only the player but for the club. And if Josh Bell gets back to his all-star form, remember his career high was 37 home runs. Yep. Great power from both sides of the plate. I feel he's going to benefit not only in the middle months here in the summer, as you guys well know, that jet stream out to right center field at Progressive Field is really a haven for not only doubles but for home runs from both sides of the plate. So we'll see how Josh adapts here on the American League side to the pitching. And I think for him, he doesn't have to come in and shoulder the entire load. He's got, a top 10 overall player in the league and Jose Ramirez hitting in front of him. He's going to have some options behind him, whether it's a right-handed starter and it's Josh Naylor or Andres Jimenez. If it's a left-handed starter, you can pop Oscar Gonzalez up there. So from a balance standpoint, it helps because you get the back-to-back switch hitters in J. Ram and Josh Bell. But I don't feel he needs to do so much offensively or feel like he's got all that pressure to have to shoulder most of the offensive load.
Jensen, one of the things we've been talking about throughout this offseason is how difficult it is for rookies to duplicate that success in year number 2. The sophomore slump is real. And I know that we sort of fell into this beautiful outfield when you get surprises in the corners out of Kwan and Gonzalez. Nobody had that on their 2022 bingo card. And yet, here we are. How concerned are you that one or both of these guys take a step backwards now that there's a full book on both of these guys and how to pitch to them?
Yeah, Jay, first and foremost, I probably could make a comeback with the gold gloves we got in left and Kwan and Straw in center. They could run down all the fly ball outs I used to give up. So I think from that standpoint, defensively, you feel really comfortable with what Kwani can do in left. obviously the ground that Miles covers in center, it really helps Oscar and Wright just worry about a little bit less real estate. Your fears about the offense are well warranted, and it's well documented. Of course, year two, always a struggle for guys and the league adjusting to them. The thing that I think might be an outlier is Kwani first and foremost, because his approach already is putting the ball in play.
Right.
And as we know with the new rule changes, the lack of the shift, I think he's going to benefit already from his mentality that he already had for just an entire season last year. With Oscar, he's so good at being able to use all parts of the field, and that's so rare for a guy with his size, his demeanor, and his offensive capabilities. So for Oscar, I think the one thing I look at, if I was an opposing pitching staff going against him, I would want to try and see him have to beat me, ironically, more to the pull side, because you guys know he likes to go to that right center gap. He likes to go shoot the ball the other way and get those doubles. Yeah. To me, I want to crowd him in as much as possible, force him to kind of get uncomfortable. If he's able to stay disciplined, and he showed that pretty well overall last year, I think the league's in trouble, because that's a really tough habit to break.
I think the good thing too, Jensen, I was saying this yesterday, the Guardians have so many good young players that even if there's some, because you know as well as anybody, like it's not basketball and football where a guy usually once he's good just stays good. I mentioned, Cody Bellinger was like on a Hall of Fame track, and now he signs a 1-year prove-it deal. So this happens all the time in baseball, especially with young players. But the Guardians have so many young players that, let's say Oscar Gonzalez had a down year and then maybe it's 2024 that he bounces back. Well, maybe Will Brennan picks up the slack. Or I know it's a different position, but maybe Gabriel Arias picks up the slack. Like there's so many other young guys that I think even if they get sophomore slumps from some of them, somebody else will step up.
Bull, I mean, the farm system is loaded, especially at the top end, and it's been rare that we've been able to say that in Cleveland on the position player side. Mm-hmm. We're used to it being pitching you and just producing top-end arms year in and year out. I think the guys to focus on, if some of the year two guys off the opening day roster falter a little bit, we've heard so much about George Valera in the outfield, Kenzie Noel, Brian Rocchio, a couple of names already. You mentioned Arias. I think there's enough depth from a potential standpoint that the club feels pretty good that if they need to dip down to AAA right away, they can do that. However, and this is an outlier for Terry Francona, he usually is not as patient with some of the younger guys. He likes to lean on the veterans. It may be taken out of his hands this year where it's just, okay, we got to ride with these guys. And I think the silver lining here, fellas, is, last year they were so good with Chris Valleca's idea of let's put the ball in play, let's put as much pressure on the defense going first to third as possible. And now with the added power from Bell and hopefully from Mike Zunino at the bottom of the lineup, all due respect to Austin Hedges, guys, you no longer have sort of that automatic out in that 8 or 9 spot. You've got a guy in Z who can change a game with one swing, and with Straw coming on the way that he did in September and October, you feel much more comfortable being able to turn the lineup over and have some continuity top to bottom.
Hey, Jensen, so when you look at it now and you see that as we approach the upcoming season, the league has now have a better idea what what the Guardians are about. What's a projected number you think should be their target goal for wins? What do you think that looks like now that it's not a surprise anymore who they are?
Yeah, I honestly, Brad, I think if you look at the 85 to 90 win window right there, and to me, it's the first team to 85. Whoever gets there first is probably going to win the division. The thing that we looked at the last couple of years is the White Sox on paper have looked phenomenal. I wonder how they change this year, though, knowing that Jose Abreu, who's been the face of the franchise, leader of that club, is no longer there. They didn't get Tim Anderson for the last 2 months of the season last year, and I think he's been their heartbeat. As much as Jose is for us, Timmy A is definitely that for Chicago. Minnesota, I'm still not sold on the rotation. I don't know if they've got enough there, turn in and turn out. I think their offense is going to be pretty good. And the back end of their bullpen should be good with Lopez and Duran as their 1-2. And then, with Detroit and Kansas City, guys, we've been really good at beating up on them the last couple of seasons and piling up those wins. Now with the balanced schedule, you don't get that luxury of playing them 19 times. So how does that affect that win total? Yeah. That's why I'd kind of side on that 85 win mark. If they're the first one there, then I think they repeat as Central champs.
Jensen, when we were covering the playoffs, and they got to the Yankees. The Guardians, they're a nice story through till you get to the big boys. You got to the New York, and you just always had this impending feeling that no matter how well you played or how well you pitched, the 3-run home run was right around the corner. Like you got through their order, and all of a sudden, whoop, 3-run homer. Do you believe that the Guardians can still play the way that they play in terms of exhausting every pitch, exhausting every opportunity on the base pass, without having that power number to compete with the big dogs like the Yankees?
The power needs to be there, and I think if you look at the last 4 to 5 World Series participants, they obviously have that element. As far as that Yankee series go, I'm no conspiracy theorist, but boy oh boy, did they find it convenient not to play that day and be able to give that pitching staff a little extra time. Not saying anything, but just saying. I mean, we had to. I was there at Game 4. I sat through the rain and the drizzle. Seemed like they could play through it, and plenty of people on the ground here in New York were like, "Yeah, probably could have played." But hey, that's in the past. But your point is well taken from the power aspect, where you look at what Houston has done year in and year out. Obviously, the Yankees live and die with the home run ball, and they'll probably have to do it again a little bit this year. I think for Cleveland, and it'll be fascinating to see how the rule changes affect, where offenses go as far as their creativity. I think Cleveland was a year ahead of the curve playing the way that they did offensively last year, because now you're basically putting this on all 30 teams of no shifting guys. You get the bigger bases, so you're going to entice more stolen bases. Well, we had 5 dudes with 10 or more last year. It was a key part of their game. I just think they have enough pitching top to bottom, and they showed that last year. Now you get a little offensive burst, and that might be enough for them to get past some of the bigger teams.
Jensen, let's wrap it up with the pitch clock, because this is a big one. And as a former pitcher, I'm curious your take on it. I'm really less worried about the starters, because all the Guardian starters work pretty quickly. But guys like especially Karinchak, to a lesser degree Clase, they work slower. How tough an adjustment do you think it's going to be for all these guys, but especially the guys in the bullpen?
Yeah, I'm glad, Bull, that they're doing the first 2 weeks of camp, or at least right out of the chute day one. So you get the opportunity to fail a little bit and test some things out routine-wise, pitch-to-pitch-wise, right there in a game that really doesn't count. I'm fascinated with the decisions on how many times you pick over, and if you're going to go that third time and you don't get the guy out, the opportunity to move up 90 feet for the opposition is interesting. And then also where the managers decide to throw down or to try and control the running game in late game situations. I love the pitch clock. I'm probably a break from traditionalists. Yeah, I worked fast, so it would never have affected me. But I think you're going to have the onus and the urgency much more across the board, and I think it'll produce a much more enticing and really enlivened product on the field.
Jensen, we have 2 minutes, and I really want to get your thoughts on this. It's 2 separate thoughts. The player this year that takes that next step, and that can be anyone from Tristan McKenzie to Jose Ramirez, if you think he's got another step to take. Which player takes that breakout step, and what's your biggest area of concern for this team?
I'll start with the second one, and I think my biggest area of concern is always a team that the year prior was really not thought of or maybe taken for granted, and then they go and have the season that they did. It is always harder, and I'll take this from personal experience. In 2007, we went and we beat Detroit. We won the division. We got a game for the World Series. That next year coming in with those expectations, that was a tough thing to have to shoulder. And this is a young team still age-wise, so interested to see how they deal with it. They've got the veterans to do it, but it's easier said than done sometimes. So that would be my biggest concern. My guy to break out, I think if you're going to look at a Cy Young candidate, let's go with Tristan McKenzie.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of been a guy that, from a 2-pitch pitcher as far as a starter goes, if he adds a third pitch, he adds something like Shane Bieber was able to do with the cut fastball to go along with not only his fastball, his slider, and his curveball. Man alive, you got the makings of a guy who's got some of the best swing and miss stuff in the American League. Mm-hmm. I think he's got that opportunity to really flourish. And if you're going to pick a guy to really, throw some – now we can do it in Ohio since it's legal. That's right. You can throw some soft earned dollars on a guy to maybe take home the Cy Young Award, why not T-Mac? He's as
I'm
good a
with you.
candidate as anybody.
I'm with you. He had performances last year where he looked as good as anyone. I think the one home game against the White Sox comes to mind. He had Cy Young quality
Astros
stuff.
too.
Yeah, he's nasty.
He's just incredible. Jensen, great
Thanks,
stuff.
man.
I may see you out there depending on when you're in Arizona. I hope to, and we'll have you on throughout the season if that's cool with you.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me, and look forward to talking to you again soon.